Hey, what's happening guys, Chris here with another one of those Battlefield 1 weapon guides. Today's video is going to be focusing on one of the more unusual guns in the game, the Pieper M1893, which can be used on either a tanker or pilot loadout as a primary weapon. The Pieper is in fact a double action revolving carbine, which used the same sort of gas seal mechanism as the Nagant M1895 revolver. A pretty unique system which wasn't used very much in other revolver type weapons at the time, as cocking the gun, which could be done manually via its exposed hammer, would essentially push the cylinder forwards, closing the gap between the barrel, basically helping to increase the muzzle velocity of each fired round. And this is helped by the fact that its bullets were surrounded by the actual casing itself, thus allowing them to form a pretty good gas seal at the breech when they were thrust forwards towards the back of the barrel. The gun was chambered for the 8mm Pieper bottleneck round, which is also pretty similar to the 7.62mm Nagant cartridge, but a teeny bit longer, and it also featured a swing out cylinder which could hold up to 9 of these rounds at a time, a few more than what a typical revolver could normally carry. So the Pieper revolving carbine was a weapon from Belgium designed by a man called Henry Pieper in the late 1800s. Though despite being a gun from Belgium, it was the Mexicans who took the biggest interest in the weapon, as most of the manufactured M1893 Pieper carbines were bought by the Mexican government in 1896 and 1897 to be used by rural mounted police known as the Rurals. Because the Pieper guns could be used a lot easier with one hand than the lever-action 1894 Winchester rifles used by the Rurals before, it was a more suitable weapon to be used on horseback, as the guns didn't actually require two hands to operate, like the lever-action rifles did to chamber the next round. Although they're a lot more useful from a design standpoint for the mounted police, it was their proprietary ammunition that probably let them down. As because the 8mm Pieper cartridge was a bit harder to get a hold of in Mexico, a lot of the Rurals ended up reverting back to their good old Winchester rifles, which used more readily available ammunition. As far as information goes on the weapon, the Pieper revolving carbine was only known to be used by the Mexicans, and they weren't exactly made in very large quantities either, meaning that by these days standards, they can be very valuable to weapon collectors, as they're pretty rare and can often fetch for a fair amount of money. As far as the damage goes, the Pieper's bullets are going to pack a pretty mean punch, as they can inflict up to 40 damage each, up to the range of 13 meters. From here, that damage is going to gradually reduce over distance, down to its minimum value of 21 at 40 meters or over, meaning you'll be able to bring down an enemy in 3 bullets at those closer ranges up to about 22 meters, though it could take up to 5 direct hits to kill if your opponent is further away beyond the 35 meter mark. Compared to the other tanker pilot weapons, these damage readings are actually quite high, as most of the other carbine type guns are going to require at least 4 bullets to connect to secure the kill. With that said, the Pieper's actual range isn't particularly outstanding, as it's still not exactly the most punishing weapon in the game against targets far away. Its damage is going to start to drop off at a similar kind of distance to that of the other carbines, though because that damage is generally higher, the Pieper is probably going to seem like a more suitable choice for mid-range engagements. Netting yourself a headshot in those closer quarters will boost the damage high enough to grant you a 2-bullet kill. So if you've got a steady hand, then going for the head will usually be the most effective way to take an enemy out of the fight quickly up close. Now the Pieper might be a heavy hitter, but to compensate for its higher damage, you'll unfortunately be met with a much lower rate of fire. The gun's only going to shoot in semi-auto at 225 RPM, which is pretty damn slow, as it's actually got the worst fire rate out of all of the tanker pilot weapons. This is going to heavily reflect on that kill time, balancing it out, and overall making it a much fairer weapon. It's going to kill slightly quicker than the P08 artillery and C96 carbine at those closer ranges, though it's still not going to match up to the likes of the M1911 extended, from-a-stop auto or sawed-off shotgun. It's also not exactly a rapid killing weapon at mid to long ranges either, though because of the way the gun functions, it might seem a bit easier to use at these said distances than some of the other guns. That gas seal mechanism is going to make those bullets whiz through the air at a fairly decent speed, as the muzzle velocity for each bullet is going to reach the speed of 420 meters per second, the very same figure as the MP18, which is quicker than most of the other carbine weapons. It's not quite going to match up to the medic rifles, but the higher velocity will make the gun a bit easier to use over those slightly longer ranges, as you won't have to lead your shot quite as much with those bullets travelling a bit faster. Taking a look at the recoil pattern, we can see that the Pieper M1893 deals with kick fairly well. Its vertical recoil figure of 1.2 is exactly the same as the C96 carbine, meaning that it's not the stablest weapon in the tanker pilot bunch, but it's not exactly far off. That horizontal figure of 0.1, however, is extremely low, making the Pieper a very accurate weapon to use. In fact, it's one of the most accurate weapons in the entire game, matching up to the Selbstlader 1906 for the medic class, a gun well known for being very precise. With a low first shot multiplier and recoil decrease rate to complement the gun's accuracy too, the Pieper can perform effectively over most ranges when it comes to landing shots on target. But because its spread is extremely low and stationary, it can often be a better tactic to stand still when engaging enemies further away, as that low spread is going to increase to a much higher value if you're moving around whilst opening fire. Just like a lot of the other carbine type weapons, the Pieper doesn't really do hip fire brilliantly, as its hip spread values are a lot greater, so aiming down the sights is usually going to be the most reliable way to take an opponent on in a gunfight. Probably one of the worst aspects about using the Pieper is down to its ammo management, as the gun can only hold a total of 9 rounds in the cylinder at any given time, which just isn't very much to work with, especially if you happen to come across a bunch of enemy players all close together at the same time. It holds the lowest amount of ammunition out of all of the carbine weapons, and if you're taking on enemies beyond 34 meters, then you'll probably only be able to kill 1 per reload, as it'll take 5 of those 9 bullets to do so, which does restrict its effectiveness a bit for those long range firefights. Not only does the Pieper have a fairly low ammo capacity, but those 4-second reload times are also really going to put you in some awkward spots, especially as you're going to have to reload the gun quite a lot. In a close quarter combat scenario with multiple enemies nearby, the Pieper might have some trouble taking them all on. You might be able to kill the first guy, and probably the second, but accounting for any missed shots, this is where you'd usually need to reload to continue the fight. And when it takes 4 seconds to do so, you're going to be a very vulnerable target when the bodies of the 2 enemies you've just dropped come to hunt you down. So in conclusion, the Pieper M1893 functions as the tanker pilot's high damage, low fire rate carbine, boasting similar kind of damage values to the medic rifles, but only within those closer ranges. It plays out in the same sort of way as the revolvers for the sidearms, which makes complete sense, with it utilising a revolving cylinder. And because it can kill in less bullets than the other tanker pilot carbines, it can often be a better weapon for quickly finishing weakened players off. Though because the weapon fires so slow, the gun's overall kill time isn't exactly very impressive, despite it dealing so much damage. With the Pieper having such a small amount of horizontal recoil, and with those spread values also being quite low when stationary, the gun's got some very impressive aimed accuracy, as although you might still need to pace your shots against targets at longer ranges to allow the sights to reset back down from that upwards kick, you won't really need to worry about your rounds flying all over the place, as wherever you're aiming when you pull down on the trigger, the bullets are gonna go. And because each round has a fairly quick velocity, these factors make the Pieper a more ideal weapon for mid-ranged encounters, with it also generally being a more effective carbine to use at longer ranges too. Not that you should really be using it as a long-range weapon, but it still works a bit better at these distances if need be. Of course, the biggest drawback to using the gun is most likely going to be down to its ammo capacity and reload times, as you're going to have to constantly adapt to the situation, hunt down cover, and be wary about your decisions in order to survive. You don't have many bullets to play around with, and it takes a longer time than normal to get those bullets back. So this is going to put a bit more pressure on you to land those shots, and perhaps force you to use the weapon in a more defensive manner. With a good aim and a steady trigger finger, the Pieper revolving carbine can be a fairly effective weapon, especially at close to medium ranges, though you'll need to be aware of your ammo count and avoid getting yourself outnumbered as much as possible if you want to do well. So that's pretty much it for another one, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video and maybe learned something new. Give me a like if you did, and subscribe to see loads of other weapon guides right here on my channel. There's going to be lots of other videos coming out soon, so stick around if you want to check them out. Thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next episode.